You seem quite taken by that photograph. Tell me, have we met before?
Sweat chilled on Liam's neck as the decrypted folder finally cracked open. He only meant to verify the recovered files for the billionaire CEO who hired him. Instead, he stared at a photograph that shouldn't exist, shattering his entire life. Then, the heavy oak doors locked behind him. Rain battered the single-pane window of Liam Sullivan's cramped Queens apartment, mirroring the relentless drumbeat of anxiety in his chest. At 34, Liam was a freelance data recovery specialist, a fancy title for a man who spent his nights salvaging lost files to keep a roof over his 7-year-old daughter's head. Harper was asleep in the next room, her breathing punctuated by the soft, rhythmic hum of a medical humidifier. The severe asthma she'd developed over the past year came with a mountain of out-of-pocket medical bills that Liam's erratic income could barely dent. His late wife, Nora, had passed away 3 years ago from a sudden aneurysm, leaving Liam adrift in a sea of grief and financial ruin. Since then, it had just been him and Harper against the world. At 11:42 p.m., his phone buzzed on the cluttered kitchen table. The caller ID flashed Apex Technical Dispatch, the premium agency he contracted for. Liam rarely got calls this late unless it was a Tier 1 emergency. He snatched it up on the second ring so it wouldn't wake his daughter. "Liam, it's Greg," the dispatcher said, his voice clipped and urgent. "I know it's late, but I need your hands on a critical job. Manhattan, 1 Vanderbilt Avenue." Liam frowned, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Greg, my sitter is out of town, and it's almost midnight. Unless this pays enough to clear my rent for the next 3 months, I can't leave Harper." "It pays $5,000, Greg said flatly. "Cash transfer the second the drive is decrypted, plus a $2,000 NDA signing bonus. But you have to be there in 30 minutes. The client specifically requested our top hardware guy." Liam's breath hitched. $7,000. That was Harper's medical debt wiped clean. That was breathing room. He immediately called his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gable, who often watched Harper in emergencies, apologizing profusely as she agreed to come over and sleep on the couch. 35 minutes later, Liam was stepping out of a cab into the torrential downpour, staring up at the monolithic glass spire of 1 Vanderbilt. He was met in the lobby by 2 towering men in tailored black suits. One of them, a man whose security badge read Miller, wordlessly handed Liam a non-disclosure agreement on a digital tablet. The terms were draconian, a $5 million penalty for breathing a word about what he saw or heard in the building. Liam signed it without hesitation. He needed the money. The private elevator shot up to the 73rd floor, the penthouse headquarters of Royce Capital. The doors parted to reveal a minimalist, hyper-modern office that smelled of expensive leather and ozone. Behind a massive slab of black marble that served as a desk stood Caroline Royce. At 42, Caroline was a titan of Silicon Valley and Wall Street. As the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund that specialized in aggressive tech acquisitions, her face graced the covers of Forbes and Time. In person, she was even more intimidating. Dressed in a razor-sharp charcoal suit, her icy blonde hair pulled into a tight chignon, she possessed an aura of absolute, uncompromising control. "Mr. Sullivan," Caroline said, her voice a low, smooth alto that commanded the quiet room. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Of course, Miss Royce," Liam replied, setting his heavy Pelican case of tools onto a glass coffee table. "What exactly are we looking at?" Caroline gestured to a mangled piece of machinery on her desk. It was a custom-built, military-grade titanium laptop. The chassis was bent, the screen cracked into a spiderweb of dead pixels, and the keyboard was partially melted, smelling faintly of burnt copper. "An unfortunate accident," Caroline said smoothly, offering no further explanation for the catastrophic damage. "The machine is garbage. However, there is a locally stored, air-gapped folder on the internal NVMe drive. It contains the final contracts for a hostile takeover I am initiating at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Without those files, the deal collapses. My internal IT department said the motherboard is fried, and the TPM encryption chip is locked. They told me it would take 3 days to bypass." She stepped closer, her piercing green eyes locking onto his. "I don't have 3 days, Mr. Sullivan. I have 8 hours. I was told you are the man who can bypass a hardware lock and extract raw data better than anyone on the eastern seaboard." "I can," Liam said, his professional instincts kicking in as he examined the wreck. But if the drive itself took physical damage, or if the encryption header is corrupted, I'll have to rebuild the partition tables manually. Do you have the BitLocker recovery key? Written on a piece of paper in the safe behind you, she said, nodding toward a hidden wall panel. You have the room to yourself. My security will be outside. Do not open any files other than the folder labeled Project Apex. Verify the data is intact. Transfer it to this encrypted thumb drive, and you will be paid. Understood, Liam said, already reaching for his precision screwdrivers. Caroline paused at the heavy oak double doors. She looked at him for a fraction of a second too long, an unreadable expression flickering across her normally stoic face. Be very careful, Liam. Some things are delicate. The doors clicked shut, leaving Liam alone in the cavernous, silent office. For the first 2 hours, Liam was completely lost in the rhythm of his work. The physical extraction of the M2 solid-state drive was a nightmare. The chassis had been crushed with such localized force that Liam suspected someone had taken a sledgehammer to it. He used a micro-drill to strip the stripped screws and carefully pried the fragile memory stick from the charred motherboard. He slotted the drive into his own external enclosure and connected it to his specialized Linux diagnostic machine. The drive spun up, a tiny green LED flickering to life. Step 1 was complete. Step 2 was the encryption. He inputted the 48-digit alphanumeric key Caroline had provided. The terminal window hung for what felt like an eternity, the cursor blinking mockingly in the dark room. Finally, lines of code cascaded down the screen. Decryption successful. Liam let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding and cracked his knuckles. He mounted the drive and navigated through the directory tree. It was a mess. The forceful shutdown had corrupted the master file table, turning the directory into a labyrinth of unreadable sectors. Using a hex editor, Liam meticulously rebuilt the file pathways, stitching the digital fragments back together piece by piece. By 3:15 a.m., his eyes were burning, but the file directory finally populated on his screen in clean, organized folders. He found the folder labeled Project Apex immediately. It was massive, nearly 50 gigabytes of PDFs, financial spreadsheets, and legal blueprints. To fulfill his contract, Liam needed to verify the integrity of the data. If the files were fragmented, Caroline Royce's multi-billion-dollar deal would crash and burn anyway. He randomly selected a subfolder to check a file. His mouse slipped. Fatigue made his hand clumsy, and instead of clicking on a PDF in the Project Apex folder, he accidentally double-clicked a hidden, password-protected directory labeled Archive 2018. Miraculously, because he was operating with root administrative privileges through his recovery software, the folder bypassed its password prompt and sprang open. Thumbnails instantly populated the screen. They weren't financial documents. They were photographs and scanned medical records. Liam immediately moved to close the window. He was a professional, and snooping on a billionaire was a quick way to end up in a lawsuit, or worse. But before his finger could click the red X, his eyes caught a thumbnail in the center of the grid. His blood ran cold. His heart performed a violent, stuttering leap against his ribs. He maximized the image. The photograph was crystal clear. It was taken inside a sterile, high-end hospital room. Sitting in the hospital bed, looking exhausted but radiant, was Nora, his late wife. Liam's mind short-circuited. The date stamp on the file was exactly 7 years and 4 months ago. Standing right beside Nora in the photograph was Caroline Royce. The billionaire looked younger, her hair looser, but her sharp features were unmistakable. Caroline's hand was resting affectionately on Nora's shoulder, and in Nora's arms, wrapped in a pink swaddle, was a newborn baby. "What the hell?" Liam whispered to the empty room, the sound swallowed by the thick silence. It was impossible. 7 years ago, Nora had taken a highly lucrative 6-month contract as an exclusive private tutor for a wealthy family in Boston. Liam had stayed behind in New York to keep his entry-level IT job. When Nora returned, she had surprised him with the most incredible news. She was pregnant, and she was already nearly full term. They had struggled with fertility for years, and Nora claimed it was a miracle, something she kept secret because she had been terrified of having another miscarriage. Liam, blinded by pure joy, had never questioned the timeline. With a trembling hand, Liam clicked to the next image. It was a scanned document, a legal contract, gestational surrogacy and non-disclosure agreement. The names signed at the bottom burned themselves into his retinas. Caroline Royce, biological mother, intended parent. And right below it, Nora Sullivan, gestational carrier. "No!" Liam gasped, stumbling back from the desk, his chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. "No! No! No!" He clicked the next file. A wire transfer receipt. $2 million, deposited into a shell corporation, registered under Nora's maiden name. The pieces fell into place with sickening speed. Harper wasn't Liam's biological daughter. She wasn't Nora's either. Nora had been a surrogate for Caroline Royce. But why did Nora come home with the baby? Why did Liam raise Harper as his own? Did Nora steal the baby? Did Caroline reject her? He stared at the screen, zooming in on the baby's face in the photo. He thought of Harper's striking, piercing green eyes. Eyes that looked absolutely nothing like Liam's brown ones or Nora's hazel ones. Eyes that were an exact genetic match to the billionaire CEO currently standing on the other side of the door. The quiet click of the heavy oak doors locking echoed like a gunshot in the massive office. Liam whipped around. Caroline Royce stood by the doorway, her hand slowly dropping from the locking mechanism. She held a crystal tumbler of amber liquid in her other hand. The intimidating, stoic facade was entirely gone. In its place was a look of intense, raw vulnerability mixed with cold calculation. She walked slowly across the room, her heels clicking against the marble, until she stood on the opposite side of the desk. She didn't look at the computer screen. She didn't need to. "You always were meticulous, Mr. Sullivan," Caroline said, taking a slow sip of her drink. "I knew if I handed you a drive with corrupted sectors, you wouldn't be able to resist doing a deep sweep." Liam's voice caught in his throat. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You planned this. The broken laptop. The midnight call." "Of course I did," she replied smoothly. "Do you honestly think a woman in my position drops her laptop by accident? Do you think I let third-party contractors into my private office unless I orchestrate it? I needed a reason to get you here, a reason that wouldn't arouse suspicion." "Harper," Liam choked out, the name tearing from his throat. "You're her biological mother." "Yes," Caroline finished, her voice hardening. She set the glass down on the desk with a sharp clack. "Nora stole her," Liam said, his voice rising in panic and fury. "She broke the contract. That's where the money came from. But why didn't you come for her? You have billions. You could have crushed us in court." Caroline laughed, but the sound was entirely devoid of humor. It was a hollow, broken sound. "Nora didn't steal her, Liam. I paid Nora the $2 million to disappear with the baby. I made her take Harper." Liam stared at her, utterly paralyzed. "Why?" Caroline leaned across the desk, her green eyes blazing with a fierce, terrifying intensity. "Because the men I was dealing with 7 years ago wanted to leverage my unborn child to take control of my empire. And if they found out she existed, she wouldn't have lived to see her first birthday. Nora was the only person I trusted to hide her in plain sight." Caroline straightened up, her expression turning dead serious. "But those men are dead now. My empire is secure. Which brings us to why you are here tonight." She reached into her blazer and pulled out a sleek, black checkbook, slamming it onto the glass table next to Liam's tools. She picked up a solid gold pen and looked Liam dead in the eye, asking a question that left him entirely speechless. "I gave you 7 years to play Father Liam. Now, how much will it cost for you to walk out of this building tonight, legally sign away your paternal rights, and never speak to my daughter again?" Silence stretched across the penthouse, thick and suffocating. The rain continued its relentless assault against the floor-to-ceiling windows of One Vanderbilt, but inside the office, the only sound was the jagged, uneven rhythm of Liam's breathing. He stared down at the black leather checkbook and the heavy gold Mont Blanc pen resting on the glass table. The physical manifestation of Caroline Royce's immense power lay right in front of him, casually offering to erase his existence from the only thing he had left in the world. "You think?" Liam started, his voice a low, dangerous rasp that he barely recognized as his own. "You think you can buy my daughter from me? Like a hostile takeover? Like one of your tech startups?" Caroline didn't flinch. She remained perfectly still, a predator observing its prey. "Let's be precise, Liam. She is not your daughter. She shares none of your DNA. The birth certificate you possess is a fraudulent document procured through a shell medical practice in Boston. If I file a petition in New York Family Court tomorrow morning, I can have a court-ordered paternity test mandated by noon. When the results show zero biological relation, you will be arrested for kidnapping. Nora put my name on the certificate, Liam shouted, the raw panic finally breaking through his professionalism. I was there when she took her first steps in our cramped apartment in Astoria. I was there for every midnight fever, every asthma attack, every parent-teacher conference. Where were you? Building your empire while we clipped coupons to afford her inhalers? I was keeping her alive. Caroline snapped back, her composure cracking for a fraction of a second. She slammed her hands onto the desk, leaning closer. You think I wanted to hand my newborn child to a stranger? You have no idea what the corporate espionage underworld is like. 7 years ago, my firm was targeted by the Kincaid Syndicate, ruthless venture capitalists who use extortion, kidnapping, and worse, to secure board seats. If they knew I was pregnant, they would have used the baby to force me out, or they would have simply made the baby disappear. She took a shaky breath, smoothing the lapels of her charcoal suit, instantly rebuilding the icy wall around her emotions. I paid your wife $2 million to ensure Harper had the best medical care, the safest environment, and a quiet life until I neutralized the threat. The syndicate was dismantled by the SEC and the FBI 3 months ago. It is safe now. I want my daughter back. Liam's mind was spinning 1,000 miles an hour. The betrayal of his late wife felt like a physical knife twisting in his gut. Nora had lied to him. For years, she had watched him cry tears of joy over a positive pregnancy test that was entirely fabricated. But then, a glaring inconsistency pierced through his grief. $2 million, Liam repeated, his brow furrowing. Wired to a Cayman account under the name of a proxy, LLC Nora controlled, Caroline confirmed. Tax-free. Liam shook his head slowly. When Nora died, she left me with nothing. We had $800 in our joint checking account. We were drowning in debt. I had to borrow money from my brother just to pay for her funeral. If she had $2 million, where the hell did it go? Caroline's eyes narrowed, a flicker of genuine confusion crossing her features. What are you talking about? She was heavily compensated. I assumed you were living modestly to avoid raising suspicion. We were living modestly because we were broke, Liam fired back. The realization hit them both at the same time. Nora had kept the money a secret, but she hadn't spent it on luxury. It was missing. Before Caroline could press the issue, Liam's survival instincts, honed by years of scraping by on the margins of the tech world, kicked into overdrive. He looked at the decrypted NVMe drive sitting in his diagnostic cradle, the hostiles' takeover documents, Caroline's multi-billion-dollar deal. In one swift, fluid motion, Liam reached down and typed a rapid sequence of commands into his Linux terminal. "What are you doing?" Caroline demanded, stepping around the desk. Liam hit the Enter key. A red progress bar flashed across the screen, hitting 100% in a fraction of a second. He yanked the M2 drive from the cradle and shoved it into his pocket. "I just re-encrypted the partition table using a 256-bit AES military-grade algorithm," Liam said, his voice surprisingly steady. "The key is a randomized 32-character string that exists only in my head. If you don't have this data by 9 a.m., your deal dies. Doesn't it?" Caroline stopped dead in her tracks. The security guards outside the door shifted, their shadows visible beneath the heavy oak frame. "Are you threatening to ransom my own data, Mr. Sullivan? That is a federal crime. You threatened to have me arrested for kidnapping the daughter I raised," Liam countered, stepping away from the desk. "Consider this a mutually assured destruction protocol. You want your takeover documents? You let me walk out of this building right now. You do not follow me. You do not file anything in family court. You give me 48 hours to figure out what the hell my wife did and how I'm going to explain this to a 7-year-old girl who thinks her mother is in heaven and her father is a superhero." Caroline stared at him, her jaw clenched so tight the muscles pulsed beneath her skin. For a moment, Liam thought she was going to call the guards in to physically beat the password out of him. He knew men in her position had done worse for less. But then, the billionaire CEO did something unexpected. She slowly backed away, conceding the floor. "You love her," Caroline said softly, almost to herself. "It wasn't a question." "More than my own life," Liam said. Caroline looked at her watch. It was 4:15 a.m. "You have 48 hours, Liam." But understand this, I am not backing down. Harper belongs with me. I will see you on Thursday." Liam didn't say another word. He packed his tools into the Pelican case with shaking hands, feeling the heavy, metallic weight of the encrypted drive in his pocket. He walked out of the penthouse, past the imposing security details, and took the elevator down to the empty streets of Manhattan. The rain felt like ice against his skin, but it couldn't cool the burning realization that his life was a meticulously constructed lie. The sun was just beginning to bleed over the Manhattan skyline when Liam finally returned to his Queens apartment. Mrs. Gable was asleep on the sofa, a knitted blanket pulled to her chin. Liam quietly paid her, thanked her profusely, and locked the door behind her. He crept into Harper's bedroom. The soft, rhythmic hiss-puff of the humidifier filled the small space. Harper was tangled in her Elsa sheets, her dark curls, so unlike Liam's or Nora's straight hair, spilled across the pillow. He sat on the edge of the bed, reaching out to gently brush a lock of hair from her forehead. "She isn't yours," a dark, insidious voice whispered in his mind. "She is," Liam whispered back to the empty room. "Blood didn't make a father." Staying up for 3 nights straight during a terrifying bout of pneumonia made a father. Working 80-hour weeks to afford a tutor for her dyslexia made a father. But love wasn't going to hold up in New York family court against a billionaire with limitless resources. He needed leverage. He needed to know what Nora had done with the $2 million. If he could prove Nora breached the contract, or if he could find the money, maybe he could negotiate a joint custody arrangement. Liam retreated to his small home office, a converted walk-in closet filled with servers and tangled wires. He booted up his primary workstation and pulled out an old, dusty external hard drive from the bottom of his desk drawer. It was Nora's old MacBook backup. He had never looked through it after she died. The grief had been too fresh, the memories too painful. Now, it was a crime scene. He ran a deep data mining script on the backup, searching for financial strings, hidden encrypted volumes, and offshore routing numbers. For 3 hours, he found nothing but old recipes, lesson plans from her tutoring days, and photos of their early marriage. Then, at 8:30 a.m., his script flagged a discrepancy in the system's registry. Nora had installed a virtual machine, a hidden operating system running inside her normal one. It was protected by a biometric lock. Liam didn't have Nora's fingerprint, but he had something better, an intimate knowledge of her digital habits. He bypassed the biometric sensor by injecting a malicious payload through the bootloader, essentially tricking the machine into thinking the fingerprint scanner was broken and forcing a fallback password prompt. Password. He tried their anniversary. Harper's birthday. His own birthday. Incorrect. He closed his eyes, thinking back to 7 years ago. What was Nora obsessed with right before she took the tutoring job in Boston? He typed, "Miracle Baby 2018. The screen flashed green. The virtual machine booted up. Liam stared at the desktop. It was barren, except for a single folder named Medical Trust. He opened it, and the mystery of the missing $2 million unraveled before his eyes in a series of scanned bank statements and encrypted emails. Nora hadn't hidden the money in the Caymans. She had routed it through a complex web of LLCs to disguise its origin, ultimately depositing every single cent into a private research trust at Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan. Why would she donate $2 million to a hospital? Liam muttered, frantically clicking through the PDFs. He found a correspondence log between Nora and a Dr. Eris Thorne, a leading pediatric geneticist at Mount Sinai. As Liam read the emails, the blood drained from his face. From Nora Sullivan to Dr. Eris Thorne, date, the 14th of October 2019. Subject, Harper's recent blood panels. Dr. Thorne, the funding from the trust should have cleared for the next phase of the clinical trial. Please tell me the new immunosuppressants are working. Her breathing is getting worse. I can't take her to a regular pediatrician anymore. They are asking too many questions about her white blood cell counts. We have to keep this contained. Liam's hands shook violently as he clicked on the attached medical file. It wasn't asthma. Harper didn't have severe asthma. She had an incredibly rare aggressive autoimmune disorder known as pediatric pulmonary alveolar proteinosis, PAP, complicated by a unique genetic marker. According to Dr. Thorne's notes, the disease was hereditary. Liam cross-referenced the genetic marker with a dark web medical database he occasionally used for forensic recovery. The results made his stomach drop. The marker was a highly classified, heavily guarded secret among a specific echelon of the ultra-wealthy. It was a genetic flaw traced back to a specific aristocratic bloodline in Europe, Caroline Royce's bloodline. Nora hadn't stolen the money. She had discovered that Caroline's biological child was fatally ill with a disease inherited from Caroline herself. If the Kincaid Syndicate, or the ruthless board of directors at Royce Capital, found out that the CEO possessed a degenerative genetic flaw that she had passed on to a secret heir, Caroline's empire would have collapsed overnight. Shareholders would have fled. Nora, bound by the NDA and terrified of Caroline's enemies, had taken it upon herself to cure the child in secret. She had used the entire $2 million to fund a shadow clinical trial at Mount Sinai, disguising Harper's symptoms as severe asthma to Liam to keep him in the dark and safe from corporate assassins. Nora died of a sudden aneurysm 3 years ago. The money ran out, the private treatment stopped, and Harper's asthma had been steadily worsening ever since. "Oh, Nora," Liam whispered, tears finally spilling hot and fast down his cheeks. "You were trying to save her. You were trying to save us all." His phone buzzed on the desk. It was an unknown number. Liam wiped his eyes and answered. "Hello? Mr. Sullivan," came the smooth, dangerous voice of Caroline Royce. "It is 9:05 a.m. I have informed my board that the acquisition is delayed due to technical difficulties. You have 36 hours left. Have you made a decision?" Liam looked at the medical files on his screen. Caroline thought she was fighting a custody battle. She had no idea she was stepping into a life-or-death medical crisis. If she took Harper and put her under the care of standard corporate doctors, the sudden change in her carefully balanced, secret medical protocol could trigger a fatal autoimmune response. "I've made a decision, Caroline," Liam said, his voice hard as steel. "I'm not signing away my rights, and you are going to call off your lawyers." "Are you insane?" Caroline hissed. "I will destroy you." "No, you won't," Liam replied, staring at the genetic markers on the screen. "Because I know exactly where your $2 million went. I know about Mount Sinai, and more importantly, I know what you passed down to her." The line went dead silent. "Be at the Central Park Conservatory Garden in 1 hour," Liam commanded, flipping the power dynamic entirely. "Come alone. If I see a single tailored suit hiding in the bushes, I upload your takeover documents to Reddit, and I send Harper's medical file to the Wall Street Journal." He hung up the phone before she could respond. The game had just changed, and Liam was no longer playing for money. He was playing for his daughter's life. The wrought iron gates of the Central Park Conservatory Garden were slick with morning dew. The torrential rain from the night before had finally broken, leaving behind a heavy, bruised gray sky and the sharp scent of wet asphalt and crushed pine. Liam stood beneath the canopy of a massive weeping willow, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his worn denim jacket. He felt the cold, hard edges of the encrypted flash drive pressing against his knuckles. At exactly 10:05 a.m., a sleek black town car pulled up to the Fifth Avenue curb. The rear door opened, and Caroline Royce stepped out. She wore a tailored black trench coat, her blonde hair pulled back sharply, but the pristine, untouchable aura of the billionaire CEO was fracturing. There was no security detail. No men in black suits. She walked down the gravel path alone, her heels crunching loudly in the quiet garden. She stopped 3 feet from Liam, her green eyes darting to his pockets. "I am here, alone. My legal team is on standby, Mr. Sullivan. I will not be blackmailed regarding my own flesh and blood." Liam didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply unzipped his jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope, extending it toward her. "I'm not blackmailing you for money, Caroline. I want you to read this. Every single page." Caroline's jaw tightened. She took the envelope, her manicured fingers tearing the flap. She pulled out the thick stack of medical records, bank statements, and encrypted emails Liam had spent the morning printing. "What is this?" she demanded, flipping through the first few pages. "These are Mount Sinai letterheads. Who is Dr. Eris Thorne?" "He's a pediatric geneticist," Liam said softly, watching her face. "Keep reading." For a minute, the only sound was the rustle of paper and the distant hum of Manhattan traffic. Liam watched as Caroline's eyes scanned the documents. He watched the exact moment the billionaire titan broke. Her breath hitched. The color completely drained from her face, leaving her pale and ashen. Her hands began to tremble so violently that the papers rattled against each other. "Pediatric pulmonary alveolar proteinosis," she whispered, her voice cracking in half. "No, no, that's impossible. The doctors told me the surrogate screening was flawless." "Nora didn't know," Liam explained, his voice thick with a mixture of grief and exhaustion. "Not until Harper started showing symptoms. It wasn't asthma. It was never asthma. Nora used the $2 million you gave her to fund a shadow trial at Mount Sinai to keep it a secret. She knew that if your corporate enemies found out your biological daughter had the Royce family genetic anomaly, they would use it to destroy you." Caroline swayed on her feet, clutching the papers to her chest as if they were a lifeline. The icy facade didn't just crack, it shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Tears spilled over her lower lashes, ruining her perfect makeup. "My younger brother," she choked out, sinking onto a wet wooden bench behind her. "My brother died of the active variant when he was 9 years old. I carry the recessive marker. I was told the odds of passing it on were less than 2%. She looked up at Liam, her eyes wide with a terrifying raw agony. Is Harper. "She's declining," Liam admitted, his own chest tightening with the agonizing truth. "The money Nora left ran out when she died 3 years ago. I've been treating her for severe asthma because I didn't know the truth, doctor." Thorne's private trial lost its funding. She needs the advanced immunosuppressants, and she needs the gene therapy that was being developed. Caroline stared at the gravel, her mind clearly racing as the devastating reality of her daughter's mortality crashed into her. Then she let out a sharp, breathless gasp and looked back up at Liam, a sudden, fierce light igniting in her tear-filled eyes. "Project Apex," she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "What about it?" Liam asked. "You asked me why a hostile takeover was so important that I needed it done by 9 a.m. today," Caroline said, standing up, the formidable energy rushing back into her posture. "The target company isn't a tech startup. It's Meridian Genomics. They are a struggling biotech firm, holding the only viable patent for a CRISPR-Cas9 delivery mechanism capable of splicing this exact autoimmune genetic mutation." Liam's eyes widened. "You weren't buying them to liquidate them." "I have spent $6 billion acquiring the necessary proxy votes and shell companies to force a hostile takeover today," Caroline said, her voice shaking with absolute, terrifying conviction. "Because I knew I had the recessive gene. I was buying the company to open source the cure so that no one else would ever die from it. If I don't initiate the takeover by the time the market opens tomorrow, a rival pharmaceutical conglomerate is going to acquire them and bury the research to protect their own legacy treatments." The universe, Liam realized, had a twisted, terrifying sense of humor. The very files he had locked away on the encrypted drive were the exact legal blueprints required to save Harper's life. Without a word, Liam reached into his pocket. He pulled out the small, black M2 solid-state drive, the decrypted, verified data he had extracted from the ruined laptop. He held it out in the palm of his hand. "Take it," Liam said. Caroline stared at the tiny piece of hardware, then slowly reached out and took it. Her fingers brushed his, and for the first time, Liam didn't see a ruthless Wall Street predator. He saw a terrified mother fighting for her child's life. "What are your terms, Liam?" she asked quietly, clutching the drive tightly. "You have all the leverage. What do you want?" "I want my daughter to live," Liam said, his voice resolute, grounded in the bedrock of a father's love. "Here are my terms. You execute the takeover. You get the Meridian Genomics Lab to fast-track the CRISPR trial for Harper. You fund everything. And in return, we destroy the surrogate contract." Caroline blinked, caught off guard. "Destroy it?" "I am her father," Liam said fiercely, stepping closer. "Blood or no blood, I am the one who held her when she was burning up with fevers. I am the one who taught her how to ride a bike. You don't get to erase me with a checkbook and a team of lawyers. We co-parent, legally, fully, equally. You get to be her mother. I remain her father. We fight this disease together. You ever try to push me out, and I will burn your empire to the ground." Caroline looked at the tech specialist standing before her. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the cheap clothes on his back, and the absolute, unbreakable steel in his spine. She realized then that Nora Sullivan hadn't just found a hiding place for Harper, she had found the fiercest protector on earth. "You have my word," Caroline said, her voice thick with emotion. She held out her hand. Equal custody. No more secrets. We save our daughter. Liam looked at her hand, then firmly grasped it. We save our daughter. 6 months later, the private pediatric wing of Mount Sinai Hospital was quiet. Outside the reinforced glass windows, the autumn leaves of Central Park were turning a brilliant, fiery orange. Inside the sterile room, Harper was sitting up in bed, a complex IV array feeding the first round of the modified Meridian CRISPR therapy into her small arm. She was wearing a pair of noise-canceling headphones, deeply engrossed in a cartoon playing on an iPad. Sitting on the left side of the bed was Liam, reading a worn paperback novel, his hand gently resting on Harper's ankle over the blankets. Sitting on the right side of the bed, dressed in a soft cashmere sweater instead of a tailored power suit, was Caroline. She was carefully peeling an apple with a paring knife, placing the slices onto a small porcelain plate. Liam glanced up from his book, catching Caroline's eye across the bed. The billionaire gave him a small, exhausted, but genuine smile. Liam returned it. It wasn't perfect. Their legal meetings were still tense, their parenting styles wildly different, and the trauma of the past was a ghost that still haunted them both. But in this room, surrounded by the hum of medical equipment, there were no CEOs and no freelance technicians. There were only two parents, sitting on opposite sides of a hospital bed, united by the single greatest force in the world. What began as a midnight hardware failure evolved into the most complex negotiation of 2 lifetimes. Liam and Caroline never became a traditional family, but bound by a shared devotion to Harper, they forged an unbreakable alliance. The billionaire and the technician, once adversaries separated by class and secrets, finally found common ground, the unconditional, relentless love required to save their daughter's life.
Hi, my name is Shalom Royal Hunger, the owner and manager of Shalom Royal Hunger. After watching the video, Single Dad repaired the CEO's PC and accidentally saw her photo, what she asked left him speechless. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? What stayed with me most was the quiet emotional connection that started from such an ordinary moment. Sometimes people reveal parts of themselves unexpectedly, and those moments can completely change the way two people see each other. The single dad in this story seemed focused on simply doing his job, but what followed reminded me how life can shift direction through conversations we never saw coming. Do you think the CEO trusted him because of what he saw, or because of the way he handled the situation afterward? And have you ever had a small moment unexpectedly turn into something meaningful or life-changing? I think stories like this remind us that honesty, respect, and empathy can leave a stronger impression than people realize. If this story connected with you or made you reflect on unexpected moments in life, I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy emotional stories about family, second chances, and surprising human connections, feel free to like and subscribe, only if you'd like to see more.